This is one of many of these cynical reviews, but we have to talk about it.
So I just got out the cinema from watching the Marvels, and I can now officially say with 100% certainty that the MCU is dead.
How the fuck did you reach that conclusion? Holy shit, talk about an extreme overreaction.
I'm not saying they won't be able to pull a rabbit out the hat every once in a while like No Way Home or The Guardians.
So they're gonna be perfectly fine, got it?
But the respect that the audience had for Marvel has now been completely wiped out by the atomic bomb that was the Marvels.
Keep in mind that this is technically the second day of this movie's release, and we're acting like the empire of Marvel has fallen.
Because while there wasn't much respect left, any little slither of it is officially gone because this movie was so bad that it can only be described as a crime against cinema itself.
I think the YouTube nerd comic book guys have completely lost their collective goddamn minds. Like, bro, it's a movie about a fucking comic book character. You don't think this is an extreme overreaction? And it's not just this guy, all of these dudes uploaded videos saying how this is the worst movie ever. And I honestly doubt that. I don't even think the original Captain Marvel was that bad of a film.
Because the simple fact that Marvel thought this script was worthy of being filmed is bad enough, but to then film it, watch it back, and allow it to see the light of day is just straight criminal.
I can't wait to watch this movie even more now, thanks.
Because they are literally stealing money and 2 hours from anyone who watches this piece of trash.
Well, I mean, you normally watch a movie to waste 2 hours of your life, which clearly this was money well spent.
And so I'm not going to do a rundown of the film because it doesn't deserve that at all.
Good. No spoilers then.
But I will give a list of reasons and warnings for why you shouldn't see this film. Starting with the script, because every single issue with this movie stems from the script and the terrible writing that this movie had.
I hope you liked Loki or WandaVision, cause that's who wrote the script.
It would jump from epic blockbuster to small quirky comedy to a story about family to a Bollywood musical, and no, I am not kidding.
Is this your first Marvel movie? They all do that. Well, I don't know about the Bollywood musical number, that sounds fun though.
In a way, this movie is just a good representation of where the entire MCU is at.
Only it's not because a reboot is happening along with other projects.
As the whole movie seemed completely confused, and that's exactly where the MCU is.
They're not confused. They're just going through a lot right now.
Ever since Endgame, they never quite found their footing or developed a concise vision for their future and where they wanted to build towards.
They were literally building that vision leading to this movie and Secret Wars. You just don't like the content they're putting out because you're not the target audience.
And the Marvels is most definitely a symptom of that, as this is more of a Marvel issue than it is a director or an actor or a writer issue.
I don't know if you caught that, but he's admitting here that his problem is with Marvel in general, and not with the directors, actors, or script of this movie.
Because let's be real, directors don't do shit when it comes to a Marvel movie. It is 100% formulaic and just a complete machine at this point.
Sam Raimi was heavily involved in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, as was Taika Waititi in Thor: Love and Thunder.
And so there's no room for a director, an actor, or a writer to be able to implement anything they really want when it comes to these movies.
I also completely forgot about Guardians of the Galaxy 3, where James Gunn had control over that, and told the story he wanted to tell.
What happens is what Marvel wants to happen, and that's exactly it.
Well, it's called the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What do you expect? Or do you want someone like Rian Johnson to come in and put his own original spin on the franchise?
However, Marvel seem to have lost any of their artistic ability because what they were able to do from their machine for movies like Captain America Civil War and Avengers Endgame was amazing.
Hot take alert. Civil War was mid. It had like 2 good fight scenes. Also, Infinity War is easily the better option between it and Endgame. Endgame is easily bottom tier for an Avengers movie.
But they're not able to do that anymore, and we're ending up with movies like Ant-Man Quantumania and now the Marvels.
That's a huge leap between Quantumania and the Marvels. But go off.
And that's where a huge problem, I think, lies, because without a director, an actor, or a writer being able to implement any of their own ability into a movie, you just lose all the human touch and any glimmer of heart.
But they do add their own touches to their respective movies. I mean, people were upset with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness for essentially being a Sam Raimi light movie.
Because this film just didn't feel human at all, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was entirely written by AI.
It was written by 3 women, which is basically AI.
As there were definitely moments where they tried to execute on some sort of a deep human moment, however they just fell flat, with one of those moments being between Monica Rambeau and Captain Marvel. However, the example that they tried to use for there being tension in the first place between both of the characters was honestly just quite weak, and honestly just makes you want to yell to Monica Rambeau and tell her to just grow up and stop whining.
Honestly, you need tension in a movie, whether you honestly find it cringe, or honestly not that well written is beyond the point. She also needs some character growth, so that she can learn her lesson in the end. These movies are mainly written for children, you know.
Because trying to understand why Monica Rambeau or various characters throughout this movie would be feeling something at all was honestly impossible, because they never really drew from anything that seemed important enough for these characters to actually be that emotional, and so all in all it just made the characters come across as whiny babies that you just don't even care about.
Okay, I have not seen this movie for myself yet, so I don't know if Rambeau is being whiny or has a character flaw that she needs to work on. That aside, clearly this movie has some drama and tension for the character of Rambeau to develop from. It's there, you're complaining, but the writing you're looking for is there in the movie.
However, I will say there were a couple moments with Miss Marvel that I did like, and Iman Vellani definitely did her best with the weak script that she had.
So how is this the worst movie ever made that's going to make Marvel fall to its knees? If there were parts of the movie that you did like, newsflash, if there are parts of a movie that you do like, it means that the movie isn't that bad. I hope you realize that. There's also movies that are so bad they're good. That's another discussion, though I'm going off on a tangent.
However, those good moments were definitely far and few between, as the bulk of the story and the bulk of the film was filled up with huge, drastic action moments that still managed to lack any real stakes.
If the movie did have good moments, any at all, then, objectively, that means that it's not a bad movie. Your entire argument deflated the second you said you liked Kamala Khan.
And I think the lack of stakes in this film was due to the movie not quite knowing what it was or committing to an overall vibe.
It didn't have stakes because none of these goddamn movies have any stakes. Where have you been the last 10 years?
Because when you're dealing with movies that naturally have lower stakes, it's important to build up the character development or the relationship tension or some sort of a family dynamic between the characters, because that can make up for there being lower stakes when it comes to the villain or when it comes to the overall plot of the film.
That particular Tom Holland-led Spider-Man movie, by the way, the one with the multiverse whose name escapes me, had 0 stakes and absolutely no consequences after it came out. It was lambasted for member berries and is ultimately a forgotten stepping stone in the machinery that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's almost like none of these movies are promising to be life-changing, and are just mindless things to watch for hours on end.
And a good example of that is what they did with Spider-Man or Ant-Man 1.
I'm gonna keep it real with you, Chief. I watched the first Ant-Man, and I couldn't even begin to tell you what the fuck happened in that movie.
Where you get a cool relationship dynamic between the characters, they build up the characters in a way where you end up really liking them.
Do people really like Jon Favreau's character from those movies? In my opinion, he was so annoying on screen. Like, stick to being behind the camera, pal.
And regardless of how low or high the stakes are, you just want to see what happens to these characters that you kind of feel like you're friends with at this point.
Right, kind of like with the Marvels, only it's not the same because they're women.
However, with the Marvels, it seemed like they put no effort into actually developing the characters or getting into the relationship nuances between them.
From my perspective, I have yet to watch the Marvels, but I've watched WandaVision, so I already am familiar with Monica Rambeau. So I'm looking forward to seeing her character in this movie. However, I'm sure this movie is written in a way that skirts around having to watch the Disney Plus shows, but watching those shows helps to flesh out the characters. But that's more of a Marvel problem in general than it is just this movie.
And they treated the movie with the same seriousness as you would an Avengers Endgame. However, it didn't have that Avengers Endgame level threat. Therefore, the movie just fell flat and felt weak because they weren't able to add any bit of life or any bit of entertainment anywhere else in the movie.
It's been a long-running gag that Marvel's movie villains are terrible. However, that doesn't make this movie bad, just because the villain isn't great.
Because they clearly thought the plot and the stakes were high enough to warrant that amount of entertainment.
Yeah, they probably thought the plot was fine. Who honestly gives a fuck? No one's gonna remember this movie after the next big Marvel movie starring a man comes out.
However, they clearly misjudged the situation because the stakes were so ridiculously low in this movie that there was no entertainment value that came across at all.
I feel like I'm just repeating myself here, but none of these movies have high stakes. None of them. The only Marvel movie that had stakes was Infinity War, and even that is questionable with Disney bringing back Scarlett Johansson and RDJ. No one's ever really gone.
And so to me, that's what makes this movie even worse, because you can watch it and see elements that could have worked, and see mistakes that they made, and know that they could have been corrected, and if they were corrected, you could have watched a completely different movie, and you could have actually enjoyed it.
There are elements of the movie he likes. The movie probably just needs a little polishing up. What he's not saying is that this movie is so offensive and deserves to be shunned. He's saying it's okay. This video is just clickbait. If we're being perfectly honest,
Avoid it. Even if they fixed these mistakes, I don't think the movie would have been anywhere near the level of peak MCU. However, it would have been fun and quirky enough for you to end up caring for these characters.
the part he is saying out loud now is that the movie would be a lot better if it was more polished up. Which is honestly what we expect from these movie studios now. But my point stands, this movie probably isn't that bad. If it is, I'll make a clickbait video and say it's the worst movie to ever come out in all of cinema.
In particular, Miss Marvel, who they clearly want to build off and try and grow her character in the MCU. However, because they didn't develop her character in a fun or good way throughout this movie, I really don't think the audience cares enough to see the character continue, even though I do think she has some promise, but they just didn't capitalize on the few moments that they had with her.
There's a reason for that. It's because she has her own TV show called Miss Marvel. Also, this movie is called The Marvels. They're balancing 3 leading acts, not 1. If you want more Kamala, then watch the Miss Marvel Disney Plus show.
And so it ends up making you feel angry towards the film and angry towards Marvel because you know that you could have been sitting there watching a fun movie.
If these movies are making you angry, then step away. It's not that serious.
A movie that was genuinely enjoyable, but instead you were sitting there watching one big cluster of trash that caused me to turn to my brother within about 20 minutes and ask him if he wanted to leave.
Ben, you should have left.
Because this movie was just so bad, I didn't want to sit another moment in that cinema.
It's just a movie. It's not going to hurt you.
And the only thing getting me through was knowing that I had to make this review at the end of it.
You did not need to make this hit piece, bro. You could have tweeted out a shitty 280 character limit tweet like the rest of us do.
Because somehow they were able to make one of the shortest movies, if not the shortest movie in MCU history, feel like a 4-hour slow burn. Because honestly, Killers of the Flower Moon was a quicker cinema experience for me than watching the Marvels. Same goes for Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer felt so much faster than what the Marvels was, even though the Marvels came in at under 100 minutes long.
An hour and 45 minutes is 105 minutes.
And so that's a testament to the lifeless energy that was carried throughout this movie that I also saw bleed into the performances.
You said in your own review that you liked Kamala's performance, though.
And while I don't blame the actors because this definitely stems from the script.
So you don't blame the actors, but the performances weren't good. But the performances were okay, but the script was bad. But if the script had a little more polish, then this would have been a fun movie.
And also the editing as well.
You're not going to talk about editing when you've been reusing the same trailer footage for this whole review, and failed to edit out any of your loud breathing directly into the mic. I've been editing some of those out of this reaction myself. There's so many. How hard is it to control your breathing when recording audio?
Where the performances just looked flat.
Editing is not going to fix the performances. You can end this video, you're just talking in circles at this point.
And it seemed like they were whispering to each other throughout the entire movie and not putting any true inflection behind what they were saying. And I don't know if that's maybe the actors knowing that this movie sucks and losing all care and hope for it. However, I do think majority of the problem here is down to the script.
You made that argument already. Just get to the point.
And also down to the editing.
I'm almost positive the editing is better than whatever we're doing right now.
Which really did mess up the pacing, which also resulted in you not really knowing what act you were watching, as Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 all seemed to blend together, and there were no real concise plot points throughout the entire movie.
We'll see about that when us normal people go out and watch this movie. By the way, this movie's only been out for like a day.
So overall, it just felt like one big jumble.
Got it.
Which is definitely a representation for where the MCU is at now.
Great. The end?
Because this movie was well and truly the last straw for me. We need to see more good projects than bad projects, and they haven't been able to deliver on that as of late, so it definitely pains me to say that I'm completely done with the MCU.
Alright, great. End the video here, then.
But it's all gone downhill in the last year and a half, and I just can't bear to keep watching.
Fantastic. I hope you never make another video about the MCU, ever again. As for the rest of this video, I cut it out. He's just begging for likes and comments at the end. Who would do such a thing?